Eat it. Oxygen. While we Hey everyone, welcome back to the Grit Files. I'm your host, Loralyn Mears. And with us today, we've got John Glowacki. So he is the founder of Combat Control. And if you never heard of this foundation, well, you're in for a real treat here today. This is an area that we don't often cover on the Grit Files. Yes, we focus on startups and even some that are in the nonprofit realm. But when it comes to veterans and military related efforts, that's something that we've only had a few guests on so far. Some of our veterans have gone on to found startups in coaching and professional development of other folks. They've gone on to write amazing books on leadership. But in the house today, we've got John Glowacki. Hey, John.
Hey, Loralyn. Thanks for having me.
Well, let's set things up first. Before we even get into your foundation and what you're doing, talk to our audience about combat control, that some people may not recognize that it's like air traffic control, but on steroids. So talk to us about what that means in military speak.
The steroids part is a bit apropos because it's testosterone, maybe the other word for it. It's really air traffic control, air control in not only tactical, but extremely tactical environments. And the missions sort of break down into two broad areas. One is going into the middle of nowhere, very remote areas, and setting up anything from a one lane airstrip to bring in troops and equipment and whatnot. And that can be under fire, in a combat situation, but also calling in the airstrikes, the artillery, call for fire from naval assets. And it's really because of the air traffic control aspect. You see, lots of people can call in airstrikes, but when you've got an air traffic controller doing it, now you've really raised the game. It takes the chess game from, it's maybe a checkers game into a three-dimensional chess game, the complexity that they can bring to bear. And that, when you look back at the last 2 decades of war and the accolades, the awards bestowed on combat controllers, a lot of them were these major battles and firefights. And because they were attached to a SEAL team or Army Special Forces team, or in some cases, foreign forces, people don't realize, they hear, oh, the SEAL team took out all these people. It was actually the combat controller with the SEAL team that took out, a few thousand people, several hundred artillery pieces and vehicles, all in one battle. So that's sort of the Reader's Digest version, if you will.
And this group of unsung heroes really does need to be celebrated. As you said, they are orchestrating all of the moves and clearing the path for the SEALs, or doing whatever it is that they've been assigned to do with their mission. So, okay, so we've got a greater sense now of combat control versus Marines and SEAL and all of the rest of this. All right. Now, talk to our audience about who you are. You were saying earlier that you're part of the 50 plus founder group, and it's a growing number, but it's still not the dominant demographic. So talk to us about what you've done here in your startup.
Thank you. And I am the first CEO of the Combat Control Foundation. We were legally established in September 2018, but we really only began operations the middle of last year, and I was invited by the board to run this. So I'm employee number one. Very quickly, my background, I'm a retired combat controller. I retired after 21 years in 2000. I went into very quickly the tech industry. I was fortunate. I had my last 6 years in the military was very good grooming in business skills and contracting. So I was able to step off into the tech world. I think you and I had mentioned in previous exchanges, it's funny we didn't bump into each other because I was with a company then called Computer Sciences Corporation. I think you were with Sun. We would have overlapped in those points in our career. But I was with CSC for 12 years. I was in the C-suite for the last roughly 5 years. So I've been a fiduciary corporate C-level. More recently, I spent 3 years in what would be an undersecretary equivalent running a federal department in the government of Canada. which was an amazing experience. The kid from Jersey City wound up in the service of Her Majesty, and that was just an eye-opening, wonderful experience. And we got to do a lot of good and demonstrate it with facts and figures, and not just rhetoric. So that was nice.
Excellent. So what is the essence of what Combat Control does as a foundation?
So the Combat Control Foundation, and we have a career field veterans association separately called the Combat Control Association. That's been around. I remember when that was created in the mid 80s. And that's always been the thing for reunions and keeping people in touch with each other, as associations will do. The foundation, it's a charitable 501c3 organization. And we are here to support, provide care, and give back to our combat control community, the veterans and their families. We're still in very early stages. Our program areas break down to resiliency, which is a very broad bucket, and that's everything from periods of crisis through transition from the military, health, education, and heritage. Because back to the point, we used to joke around for years that nobody knew about us because we didn't have our movie. The Green Berets had John Wayne, the SEALs had Charlie Sheen. I won't make any comments. But a retired combat controller by the name of Dan Schilling, along with Lori Longfritz Chapman, who's the sister of a combat controller who fell in Afghanistan, John Chapman. They wrote his story, but it was a very intriguing way. The name of the book is Alone at Dawn. It was a New York Times bestseller. It's a wonderful read. And it's clever in that it tells the parallel story of John Chapman and combat control. So I can get more into that in a moment. But, we've got a lot to cover, a lot to make up for, because some of our brethren moved out earlier as far as establishing foundations and providing care, where, we've got less mouths to feed. We are much smaller than the SEALs, who are much smaller than the Green Berets, and on and on. Nevertheless, our folks, have the same needs. They've been in battle. They have the scars, seen and unseen. Some of them did not come back. And, we're trying to support the family members. We're trying to make sure they understand we remember them and are here to support them. And that's what, like a lot of foundations, that's what we're about. But we're supporting a community that's largely never been heard about before.
Wow. And I am always looking for ways to be able to support veterans. As we know, through our mutual contact there, Juan, he's been wonderful. He's another veteran, and just really getting set up to get the stories out and working closely with them, since they do have needs and everybody needs a hand. Plus, they've given so much to support us. What can we do for them, right? That's the question we need to be asking. All right. So now talk to us about how all this comes together with the book, actors, films, and getting the combat control story out there.
Right. So this is a unicorn event for a nonprofit, especially, again, we are a startup. So all the things that startups go through, I've been in, another startup or two, actually, previously, in the IT world, and going through all the same things here that I went through in that environment. It's crazy. You never get everything done you want to get done, and you just keep pushing through. We were also quite fortunate that we had some early benefactors last year, and that's part of it. You don't do this on your own. This is not John's story. I happened to reconnect with this community early last year. They needed help. I worked more than full time over a couple of months, and then everybody sort of recognized where this should go. And that's when I was asked to be the CEO of the foundation. We had three very successful fundraisers last year. We raised in total a little bit under $800,000, which was
wow,
wonderful. And that was in the second half of the year. So we were just blown away by that. Obviously, like business, you're always raising your targets, but it's not just more. We want more because we want more. My cocktail napkin math says we need to reach a sustainable model where we don't have to every year be asking people quite as much. So to do that, you have to fill the coffers, have investments. From those investments, you're able to cover the expenses and the care that you provide to your community. So that's the very long-term vision that we're on, and we're in the earliest stages of that. We're lucky with this unicorn event because the movie Alone at Dawn is going to be turned into a book. It's scheduled for release in a little over a year, so third quarter of next year is the latest timing. And the name of the movie will be called Combat Control. So for a nonprofit to have a major motion picture coming out, A-list director, A-list actor, Jake Gyllenhaal will play John Chapman. I actually recently learned under promise of a gag order that who the female lead is. I can tell you equal, or maybe more star power, depending on your likes. She's very powerful. So it's amazing that we have this opportunity. So are we just going to go along for the ride? Well, this is where we've got to be a bit of a business developer and say, this is a unique opportunity to get our name out. Through that, do some fundraising. And then after the movie, as movies, they wane, they go off into the Netflix file or whatever. But we'll have had that boost, and then we want to leverage that going forward now that more people have heard about us. Continue the fundraising, continue the messaging. And it's not just about fundraising, but if you've run a foundation, that's a lot of it. It's great when you can partner with others, and we're looking for those opportunities to partner with other organizations to provide care, because there's all sorts of needs out there. And that's sort of the crux of it all, is leveraging this opportunity that we have. We're running a foundation a lot like everybody else. It's just for a community that's done some amazing things for the country. And I would point something out. I didn't mention earlier about combat control. While like our brethren, we're a go-to-war crowd and the very tip of the spear. But when we had people operating in Afghanistan, for instance, fighting bad guys, dropping bombs, all of that, at the same time, we had people first boots on the ground in Haiti as part of the recovery operations. So there's also this humanitarian mission that many of us have been able to participate in over the years, various ones around the world, big and small.
And that's a key part of it too, where so much has been given, then it behooves all of us to give back. Yes. And that's exactly what we're hearing here. All right, so we're going to be watching out for that movie next year for sure. Combat Control, Jake Gyllenhaal, like not too shabby. And now I can't wait to see who the female lead is. That's going to be interesting. I'll be watching for that. And it'll be nice, I guess, that it's a year apart from all of the Top Gun Maverick stuff, because it's kind of the Air Force's summer right now, so we need to give them a little bit of spotlight and, then put it on you guys next year. With respect to journeys and things, and so I always get into this with people, say, if I could give you one undo button, one whack at it, what would you undo?
I'm sorry, undo?
An undo button, personally or professionally. You got to hit it once and you undo one thing that you did.
Okay, within the confines of Combat Control Foundation.
No, it could be anything. It could
no?
be broader. Some people have come on and said, I wish I wouldn't have married 3 times if I had just worked at the first marriage. Right? It's just
I know
a
few people, a few guys that would, yeah. The career field was notorious on marriages. The line when I first went in was, you weren't fully qualified for your first divorce, which is dark humor, but unfortunately it was all too true. I would have to say family, and just more time with the family. As I've mentioned to people very close to me over the years, and this isn't just, obviously a military career is very challenging on family, but we all get caught up in our careers, and a lot of, for very good reasons. It's not, you want to support your family, you want to take care of your kids, you want to have a retirement. People work hard, they commit, they're always asked to do more, at the job, whether it's working from home or whatever. And you can find yourself, I got to do one more thing, for work. And I would challenge that a couple of ways. One is, especially keep in mind, unless you're the company owner, you're working extremely hard and sacrificing some of your family time, maybe for some people on Wall Street. And believe me, I'm a Wall Street supporter. I'm a total capitalist, but you've got to have balance. And I think I know some people on Wall Street that would agree with that statement. So, keep it in balance. But Also, you don't know what life brings. And just to be very transparent personally, we recently had a very significant family loss. My son passed away within the last 2 months. That's not something any parent should have to endure. I say that not for sympathy, just to say, I know my son, I can hear the words, you've got this. His expectation is, we will pick up at some point and move on. And that's the spirit my family's moving in. So, you can get hit with all kinds of challenges, but if I get to undo something, I definitely would have spent more time with the family, and a few of those nights or weekends or whatever working, I might have found another way to get it done.
And, as we've communicated earlier, I'm deeply sorry for the loss of your son. That's a tremendously challenging thing to go through. I can't even imagine how a parent feels when they have to endure that. It's horrible.
But we move on.
But that's just it. I love that you're moving forward in his spirit of like, Dad, you got this. That's incredible. And, even I'm sure Father's Day must have been particularly trying. It's all the firsts in the first year, and, and then the seconds and third, like it doesn't end anytime soon, but that you've taken that spirit and you've learned from it. So maybe this is an opportunity for our audience to get some of your thoughts on, well, how do you find that balance, right? The kid's playing, Daddy, I want to go. And you're like, no, I've got to do something. Email this, RFP's due tomorrow. I've got this, I've got that. What do you do when you're that lean, bootstrapped founder? You're the startup. You're trying to get it going. You're not Microsoft. You don't have a million people working for you. What do you do?
Yeah, no, it's first of all, so I'm 61. And, with age comes perspective and all that experience. And I can look back and say, in hindsight, all sorts of things. Here I am again in a startup mode, but because of that perspective, I draw the line in a different place. I make sure I'm, taking the time with family, taking the time to make that phone call, that video call. My other child, my daughter, is an officer in the Air Force. She and my grandson are stationed in Okinawa, and it's we've got to make sure we make time for that video call, even though the significant time difference. So it's having the willingness to manage yourself a little bit better and take the chance that I got to step back and be serious about my priorities and schedule. I heard somebody say, schedule my priorities, not prioritize my schedule. A clever phrase, but there's something to it. But the other thing I would mention very quickly is, again, we don't do these things on our own. I'm not doing this on my own. I've got employee number 2 as of Friday. She was a contractor, now turned employee. That's wonderful.
That's cool.
We have several other consultants, contractors, if you will. You mentioned Juan. He's one of them. Juan Alfonso, great guy. Well, you can't say former Marine. There is no such thing, but he brings that Marine attitude to his work and does a great job for us. But it's also, I'll step back and put this in stage of life context. Where I am now, I've been a Fortune 200 C-level. I've been highest level of government. I'm not saying I can't learn anything. I look for peers who I trust. And we always need those throughout our careers. Earlier in life, I was fortunate to have some people who were my age or older who I trusted. And, you can't listen to everybody. You can't respond to everybody, but you've got to have some people that you are going to listen to. And certainly in startup mode, there's going to be plenty of naysayers. And in professional life in general, certainly in startup mode, plenty of naysayers. I've got somebody who practically calls me up on a weekly basis telling me how bad everything is. You just got to kind of take it, park it, try and help them deal with it. But you can't let that become your problem. You've got to set that aside and press on with your mission. So I'll spend more time talking about working with other people, relying on other people. It's all about good people. It's all about relationships. I tell people, let me rephrase your question earlier. It's not about what's the undo button. It's here's the one wish button. And the one wish I would have is, great relationships in all the areas I need, because I can fix anything, including money problems, with relationships. That's the one thing over the years I've thought about it different angles. More money, that doesn't fix everything. More and good, solid relationships, you can overcome anything with that. So relationships, to me, working with good people, when you hire and work with good people and work for good people, is a big deal. I've gotten picky about who I work for. That you got to be willing to walk sometimes. If it's not a good fit, move on. That's one of the biggest things I would recommend. It is all about relationships.
That's a ton of solid advice in there, John, for all of the startup founders. And I love the idea of a wish button. In the past, I've used the if I gave you a magic wand, what do you wish for kind of thing. But a wish button that works too. I like it.
I like that undo button. That was a clever one. That was good. I wasn't expecting that one. Thank you.
Ah, there you go. Well, we've got another one where I ask people, what is their kryptonite? And I'm especially curious what you would say, given that you have served in the military, you have been to combat, you have had an extremely challenging and intense role managing all of the strikes, the setups, all kinds of stuff. So what's your kryptonite, and how do you find a way to avoid it, especially in those situations of extreme duress?
Yeah, I don't have any. It's no Superman. No.
Wow.
No. What, you'll never find any of us willing to admit what that is. Of course, there's kryptonite. Hell, there's a whole catalog of kryptonite probably. But to be somewhat serious about that, I'm going to quickly come back to that answer, the comment I made a moment ago about other people, because what my various shortcomings, I typically turn to other people and say I need help, whatever those shortcomings or kryptonite might be. And I could probably cover off several things with that. I know I want to do everything myself, and I learned a long time ago that was not a recipe for success. As a leader, I tell people, the phrase used to be laissez-faire leader, and I still, I guess I show my age when I use that. When we're in crisis mode, I'm elbows deep in whatever the situation is. But as we get our handle on the situation, I know one of the best things I can do, and I walk the talk with, is to extract myself. I am then there to deal with escalations, to remove obstacles, and not to try and continue to do everything myself. Hire good people, give them what they need, get out of their way. That's been a real living mantra of mine, and I think anybody who I've worked with or who's worked for me would say that's very true. But again, I come back to, it's about having those good people that I'm willing to trust and get out of the way. Now, you've got to be careful, sometimes, and the situation with nonprofits is interesting. This is one of the differences from for-profit, in that because you've got so many people who genuinely care, you'll get a lot of volunteers, and there'll be this view, well, you can solve everything. Well, you can't run a business with all volunteers. It doesn't work. You've got to have accountabilities. You've got to say, this is what I need. This is when I need it. This is how I expect it to be delivered. And a lot of times the volunteer folks, first of all, you've got to work around their availability. Second of all, they typically don't have the skills you need. And that's most of the issues come down to those two things. And then forget about, fit and whatnot, because you'll often have a collection of people that, it's not a hired, coached team. You're sort of taking things at random. So it doesn't cohese well in a lot of cases. So that's one of the interesting issues I've run into at nonprofits. You may have a lot of people raising their hand. It doesn't necessarily mean they're the right answer.
How do you fire a volunteer?
Yeah, that's graciously. Yeah, I mean, because despite whatever else is going on, you have to recognize they were there trying to help. And so you've always got to put it in that context of really appreciate the support. let's look for another way of doing this. And in the end, all these, I'm not going to talk about examples, but I know every one of those examples, there were other ways that they were able to and did help in very significant ways. And that's not a light statement. They made trips, they devoted time, they stood in front of people, they told their story. They did some of the more administrative, tedious tasks, for us to be successful. And so they were there in, huge ways to help us. Maybe not the initial way they anticipated they were going to help.
Well, that's a lot like finding people that are aligned for the job that they should be doing versus the one they applied to do.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. We all know, we've all hired people and it didn't, you were so excited and then it didn't quite work out. I like a lot of people, I don't like firing anybody. A lot of times it's, okay, how do we adjust this? Because maybe there's a different fit. And sometimes it becomes self-evident. Sometimes you have to hunt for it a little bit.
All right. So what's on deck for the second half of the year here for Combat Control? You guys are just going to be waiting to start promoting the big movie for next year. What are you doing?
That's always, I've got that business developer gene in me. That's always ticking, what you've never done enough when you've got that kind of situation. So obviously, let me talk about that now. I'd like to talk about some of the back office, less sexy kinds of things, because that's equally important. Our vision is that when the movie happens, we will have communicated through a variety of means across the country and have events going off so that really when the movie releases, we're having release parties across the country and have them all fire off about the same time. I'm sure the producers of the movie, of which the authors are, executive producer on it. So that's great that, they're being able to be the voice of Combat Control and of John Chapman's story, and it's not being done at arm's length. But, we've got a lot we're trying to accomplish to support our community. To the extent we can work together, they've committed to do that. That's great. That's all the movie stuff going, into next year and beyond. Our board, we have a new board. They're very excited about all this. We're actually looking to add a few more folks to the board. So we have a nice combination of skills and, network that we can leverage, in that vision across the country. But then shifting to the other thing that I mentioned, the back office, less sexy. If you don't have the good business operation foundation, you're not going to be successful. We all know you can throw a lot of money at something, but if the organization isn't set up well to execute it, that's just going to be a money pit. One of the things that I did in my earliest days in this was to put in place the processes, the situations where I minimized the single points of failure. And so, for instance, when we had our loss, and actually that was the second loss because my father-in-law passed away in November. So in less than a year, we had two big losses in the family, as well as family medical situations. I've had to step away a number of times, and not knowing that was coming, but knowing these things happen, I made sure we had those redundancy processes in place so things don't fall apart because one person happens to not be there. The folks that we have on board are experienced in the nonprofit space. In our contract support, our new operations manager, also a wonderful woman, good experience, just takes things on, gets them done. And that goes back to that point about hiring good people. You hire good people, and it's amazing how so many things just get done. And I love those days. So yeah, we're still building the organization. There's still a lot left to do, but then we've also got to do that brand building and communications and marketing and fundraising. We have 2 fundraisers in Texas later this year. Texas has been wonderful to us. We've got to break out into other parts of the country. I'm looking at Nashville next. And then we want to get into Northeast and Chicago and, maybe the West Coast. So we've got a lot to do.
No vacation for you.
No,
right?
no.
You've got your hands full.
No rest for the weary, no.
All right, John, our last question is my signature question of the podcast, and it is the silliest one. but it's kind of fun because it reveals personalities. So if we got a peek into your closet and there was a pair of footwear in there that personified you, John Glowacki, CEO of Combat Control, what footwear are we looking at and why does it relate to who you are and your personality?
That's a very interesting question. I had listened to your podcast, but I never got to that part. So
You never got to the end.
yeah, no, I
It's
was trying
always
to
our
go
last
for
question.
I was trying to go for variety through them. So yeah, I was just making assumptions. That's a very interesting question. So one of my dilemmas is I've tested out as left 50-50 left brain, right brain. So I'm always thinking of spectrum, of things. I could give you several answers to that, but I have to admit the one that seems to be rising to the top the most are my very worn, need to be replaced, highly cushioned Skechers that I get to wear in a variety of situations short of formal. Yeah, I put a lot of wear on those. They're the most cushioned shoes I've ever had to wear because I mentioned my age earlier, and my medical records when I retired, the joke was they were going into their second edition. There's a lot of wear and tear there. But I also, style-wise, I pick them so I can go through a variety of situations, as many as I can with them, for travel and flexibility and all those things. But the fact that they wear, I love Skechers, great shoes. I think they actually wear very well, but I seem to be able to wear them out significantly. So maybe that says something about on the go.
Well, there you go. Versatility meets functionality. So all
There
good.
you go.
So with that, John Glowacki, CEO of Combat Control, we all look forward to seeing the movie fall 2023. We'll be looking for it, looking for release parties and all kinds of other updates. Thank you for being a guest on our show and thank you for your service.
Thank you, Loralyn. This has been wonderful. Thank you very much.
And how about that fantastic intro by Touch Circle?